recording, and I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so this is our first SHIELD webinar, and SHIELD is in phase 1, a NASA Drive Center. This was part of the decadal survey call to have important questions being answered.
Just went for a walk.
Can you mute yourself, whoever just entered? So our center is called SHIELD, and the long name is Heliospheric SHIELD. I'm the PI, Merav Ofer. It's a multi-institutional center. John Richardson is a PM, and Joyce Wong, that is also on the call from BU, she's our Director of Outreach. So the vision of SHIELD, the goal, is to develop a predictive global model for the heliosphere. And SHIELD stand is an acronym and stand for solar wind with hydrogen ion charge exchange and large scale dynamics, so SHIELD. And SHIELD stand because we are shielding energetic particles and dust from the galaxies that enter in our solar system. And the idea that we are going to use combinations of state-of-the-art observations, theory, and models, both MHD and kinetic, to achieve this goal. So it's a really large center. It's lots of members. This is a website you can see here at the bottom if you want to check and see all the members and activities we are doing. I think as an overall guideline, what we are trying to answer is understand the heliosphere. This is the only astrosphere that we know of that surround a habitable stellar system. We are looking for other stellar systems that are habitable. We at least have one data point that is our astrosphere. There is a big search for other Earth-like analog, but one of the drive of this center is to really characterize the shielding properties of these astrospheres. The shielding properties are crucial for the development of life, and we really don't understand that in our heliosphere. So one of the goals of SHIELD is to lay the groundwork to predict habitable astrospheres. And we will have probably a webinar about that next year. In any case, our next webinar, just to give an advertisement, we'll have these two rock stars, Margie Kivelson and Nikki Fox. They are going to talk about their careers, some of the challenges that they faced as female scientists in roles that were very, especially in the time of Margie Kivelson, very few female scientists faced, and how they navigated also being moms and being a trailblazer. So if you want, go to our website. There is a link in upcoming webinars to register, and we're looking forward for you guys to attend that. Again, this is a website. I just took a snapshot, and the reason why I wanted to show you folks that, because down here you can see there is an email, shieldoutreach@gmail.com, and we are doing lots of activities, both in research and both in outreach. The outreach portion has a couple of components that you might be interested in getting involved. One of them, we started launching this series called Testimonials. And this came from a conversation that Joyce Wong and others had. And I think she was the one that coined it. You can't be what you can't see. That we needed to show faces of space scientists, especially in space physics, of people that are not the typical ones that you will imagine being a space scientist, and why they got interested in space science and what their background. And they recorded a beautiful, candid testimonies for us. You can go to our website and click on that. You will see their narratives. And we gave them a guideline, what we wanted to hear. So if you want yourself to record the testimonial, even if you are in a STEM field, not directly in space physics, but related, we will be open for you guys to participate. So please send an email to shieldoutreach@gmail.com or to my own email. So this is it for now. And I will come back at the end just to show again these slides, the last slide of the upcoming webinars. And I will pass the ball to our first webinar. We're very excited. That is Heather Elliott, as she's part of the SHIELD team. And as part of the SHIELD webinars, we will have part of common themes driven by these testimonials, but also part of career development. And today is a talk class about how to write better. And this is a theme that Heather identified as several people approaching her to ask for advice. Heather, you take it from here.
Okay. Yeah, I'm Heather Elliott. I work at Southwest Research Institute in San Antonio, Texas, and I also do some teaching in a space physics program at University of Texas at San Antonio in San Antonio. So my title, A Path to Improving Writing Skills, Things I Didn't Learn in School. This is so true. I didn't learn it. And if you had asked me years ago, I would be giving, or if you told me years ago I'd be giving a talk like this, I would probably tell you you're crazy. I wasn't known for my writing skills at all. And I faced a lot of frustrations. So you can see here on the introductory slide, I have it pulling my hair out. It was so frustrating to me. Many of the things I learned in class were not the things that my colleagues and boss were complaining about with my writing. They totally understood what I was saying, but they hated the way that I worded it. And every time I'd ask for help from people that had English degrees, they would mark, a few spelling errors and a couple comma errors. But that's not what my colleagues and boss were complaining about. There was only one real critique I got that was helpful. And unfortunately, it only turned out to be helpful in retrospect. It was, you do not write like you speak. I understand you fine when you speak. So, it was a long journey to figure out what was going wrong. And once I figured out what was really going wrong and what the missing information was that I, needed to learn, it became very clear as to why they could understand me when I speak, but not, they just, and they would cringe when they would read my writing. So I went down a long path, but the good news is that analytic skills that you have in physics and math can be applied to improving your writing. There are clear patterns that you can learn by going over examples of poorly written texts that have been edited to be improved. And so that's the good news. So we have good news. So in frustration, one night I started searching the web on things to improve writing, and I came across this word rhetoric, and it was in reference to writing, which I thought was unusual because I'd always heard the word in terms of speaking. And it turns out there are only a few programs, college programs in the country that focus on rhetoric. And what they mean by rhetoric is that they go in depth into editing the style of writing, to become clear, to become concise. Most colleges and high schools do not teach advanced writing and editing techniques. There's only a few programs. One of the biggest holdouts, I think that they used to teach this more in the past, but one of the largest programs in the country that still focuses on this is the University of Chicago. And the University of Chicago has its own press company, publishing company, the Chicago Press. And so I came across, some of the books from the Chicago Press that were on this and that were, developed out of this rhetoric program that they have. And so the three books that turned out to be most useful are Style Towards Clarity and Grace by Joseph M. Williams, The Craft of Research by Booth, Colm, and Williams again, and then also the Oxford Essential Guide to Writing and Thomas Kane. I think that some of these techniques are maybe still taught more frequently in England than they are taught in the US, because I have some colleagues, when I've worked on projects with them, they use some of these same techniques. And so I think the U.S. has gotten away from teaching a lot of this. And but there is material. It just takes a lot to find it. But basically, when I came across these types of books, I just ordered a bunch of them, and they were all things I could find on Amazon. They were cheap paperbacks, and these are the top 3, the ones I found the most useful. None of them are hard to read. The third book, you don't need everything. At the end of this, I'm not going to go over it today, but I have basically little book reviews for each of these 3, and I have some additional ones listed that you could also, if you want to go even more in more depth. Okay. So, you have to identify first what type of problem you're having. I did have many problems, but the most important for me was a psychological issue. I would get so anxious and I would dread it so much because I got such bad feedback. And then I had this added problem that people understood what I said, but they still hated it. And so, and then I was getting even more harsh criticism because everybody was saying, well, English is your first language. You should be better at this. You do fine when you speak. And so it's like a strength in one area was basically just like adding to even additional criticism in the writing area. But you're really in luck if grammar and spelling is your issue. There's a lot more resources for that. But that wasn't my main problem. I did make a few of those mistakes, but it wasn't my main one. Do you have problems with clarity? Do people easily follow what you're saying? Are you concise? Being concise is super important in technical scientific writing because we have a lot of types of writing that are page limited. And even when they're not page limited, if you write in a way that's really long, a lot of people won't want to read your papers. So we have a real need to be concise. And so this is often a huge problem for a lot of people. I was not concise enough, and there's some reasons why I wasn't concise. I'll try to mention those. Organization, are your thoughts arranged well? The type of writing we do is a little formulaic. So organization is not typically the major problem for most people, but you can have organization issues at different levels. Are your sentences easy to follow? You may be switching your clauses, having one clause before the other, and it would make sense to do it and swap it around. And then you might have problems organizing your paragraphs or the overall document. Coherence, are your arguments clear and in logical order? Okay, I have a typo there. But and then are you providing enough detailed description? Are you very precise? And so since we are doing technical writing, being precise is very important. Does your writing flow well? Are you moving effortlessly from point to point? Do you repeat blocks of text throughout the document? Now, there could be types of writing where repetition is used as a technique to emphasize a point, but that is typically, frowned upon in technical writing where people just want to understand your main points and get to the end. And there are key areas where you would want to use repetition, like repeat a key point at the end in your conclusion, but you don't want to repeat stuff too much. Shorthand phrases, do you need to find shorthand phrases to refer to a complex thing that you're going to, use repeatedly throughout your document? Do you have issues speaking? Because if you have problems speaking well, this might translate into bad writing. And now this can go either way. If you speak well, it can improve your writing if you try to write in a way that's similar to the way you speak. But if you use too many colloquialisms, that can be a hindrance. However, the caveat to that is that it is easier to remove colloquialisms after the fact. Okay, so the psychological issues, if you worry too much, you end up trying so hard that you make your writing worse. I definitely fell into this category. What happens is if you're worrying a lot, you'll write in an overly formal way. When you write in an overly formal way, you're going to add in all these extra preface statements, and you don't need those. You may string too many adjectives together because you're trying to be very precise. You may use the word "the" too much, because you're trying to be so surprised. You're saying, like the solar wind, and you could just say solar wind. Like, so you really got to watch out for the word "the," but it's coming because of anxiety. You would never say it that way. So this is an instance where you would probably drop a lot of the "these" when you're speaking. But if you're trying super hard and you're trying to be really careful, you might add them in when you're writing. And so these are the kind of issues. But basically, you just need to chill out and try to relax and not worry. But if you're not doing a good job, then you're going to worry more. But definitely trying to write in a way that's similar to your speaking may help. We just have to really watch out for the colloquialisms and remove those after the fact. Words, some words like the word "like," you want to remove those, and words like "so," which are too colloquial, you would typically only say that in speech and not use the word "so" very much in your writing. If spelling and grammar are some of your main issues, the spell check and grammar check in Word has gotten really good. And believe it or not, I came along where people were just really starting to use things like Word on the computer. So I kind of came into the field and into physics, and when people were really starting to have personal computers. And so the spell check and grammar checks have evolved a lot in that amount of time. And so what I found was that the more I used spell check and grammar check, the more I realized, oh, these are my common problems. And now some problems the spell checker doesn't catch, like if you have homophones or technical terms, like the spell checker might flag it too much if it has a technical term that's not a typical English word. But if you have words that sound the same that are spelled differently and you accidentally type the wrong one, you need to make a list of your common mistakes, and you probably have to check on your own, do an automated search to find typical mistakes that the spell checker isn't catching. Now, the one I have here in blue, I personally try very hard to avoid the word "assess," because if you leave off the last S, you have a word you do not want to use, and the spell checker will not find it. And it's quite embarrassing, but I accidentally have left the last S off. So another typical issue as to why you might have problems with spelling, especially I's and E's, even if you know which comes first. The I and the E are on the same finger, but on different hands. You might have one hand that's faster than another. So that could be a reason why you would type I and E wrong, even though you know which it is. I grew up learning phonetics, so I often will type the wrong word just because I'm sounding it out in my head. I actually know which one is which, so I often have to go through and electronically search for the word "there" just to make sure I haven't switched to the wrong "there." But I can catch it because I actually know which is which. It's just sometimes I type it wrong. Okay. Clarity. So some big problems with clarity. If your sentences are really long, people are going to lose track of the train of thought that you're trying to express. And so typically, if you see your sentences are really long, you're going to want to revise those some. And do stray away from the basic sentence constructions of subject-verb and subject-verb-object. These types of sentences are the easiest to understand in English language and are at the core of the English language. Have you converted too many verbs into nouns? This is called nominalization. Consider, you might write as consideration. Evolve, you might write as evolution. If you do this too much, it turns your writing into something more abstract, and it gets you away from the typical, a simple subject, a simple verb, a simple object. So I recommend trying not to do this too much. You can do it some, of course, but you don't want to do this too much. Now, at the end of the slides, I'm not going to go over it. There's a history as to how nominalizations became popular in the English language, and it has to do with the Norman Conquest. The English language has evolved, and we have all these different options of ways you can word things, and all these different synonyms and stuff. And so that has actually made it more difficult to understand sometimes, because we have all these different possibilities from all these different languages that have merged to form the English language. Do you have too many prepositional phrases? That also can make it harder to distinguish, the subject and the verb and the object. And this is also related to wording things concisely. If you have too many prepositions, there's typically a way to word it that is more concise. These are some examples. I've got two examples here on clarity on 2 slides. The first section is what not to do, and then the second one is how you could improve it. And this one is dealing with normalization. So in red at the top, I have marked nouns that are normalizations, and then when you rewrite it, when you edit it, it's turned into verbs. And so this example is taken from the book Style Towards Grace and Clarity by Joseph M. Williams, and I've put the page number in here. And but like in the second example, because we knew nothing versus our lack of knowledge. And so we knew, you've got your subject and your verb, and so that's typically easier to understand when you use this, when you try to write things more in a subject verb object format, as opposed to taking the verb and turning it into a noun. But the most common normalizations are these ones that end in tion, sion. These are often the instances where people have converted a verb into a noun. Okay, all right, and so here's another example, and so like decisions in regard to the administration of medication, and then you've got of irrational patients, and in trauma centers to provide, and then the last one, like with a physician, like that's a lot of prepositions. And then the improved version is written in a format where it's much easier to identify the subjects and the verbs when a patient voluntarily appears, and so this is just much easier to follow. And so whenever you see a lot of prepositions, you need to start thinking about, how do I write in a way that doesn't have so many prepositions? And so, but this is another example. And the thing I like about these books that I'm recommending is that they do a ton of examples. And so it teaches you how to identify when you're doing something that falls in the what not to do category, but then it also gives you techniques for how to make it improved. Like, what do you actually do? So you'll be able to identify the problems that you're having, and then you already will have a solution in hand. And so the biggest one that's really common in our field is being concise. Do you have unnecessary preface statements? Now, this is taught a lot in school, to add in these preface statements, but you don't have room for them in scientific writing. I have on here a little cartoon, so this guy looking at the TV and the news is on, good evening, thanks, news broadcast will be to the point, everything is horrible, good night. Now, we don't want to go overboard on being concise, but, since it's technical writing, people want to just get to the point and just understand what you've written. And so here again, if you've used the word be too many times, look at it, cross it out in your head, read it without the word be, and see if you need it. If you don't need it, if you wouldn't say it when you're speaking, then you can go ahead and cut it out. If you have a string of adjectives modifying a noun, most likely you are using too many adjectives. You want to limit the number of adjectives that modify a noun to 1 or 2, but don't put like 3 and 4 adjectives in a row. You're not helping anything by doing that. You're just basically making it harder to understand. Are you using a lot of compound tenses? Now, this is very important for being concise. If you look at a lot of the large proposals that are sent to NASA, especially like the instrumentation ones and the mission proposals, they're almost all typically written in simple present tense. Now, there's actually, I believe there's 2 reasons for that. The simple present tense is more concise. You don't have room. Your page limited. You don't want to use a tense that's going to make you waste a lot of space. And so, like the example of that, you would say I go, not I have been going. So simple present tense is great for being concise. And a lot of people don't want to do that because when they're writing, they say, well, I've done this. I want to use the past tense. And then if they're writing the proposal, they say, oh, I want to say I'm going to do or I will do because the future tense. Now, the problem with using like will and could and would is that when you're writing a proposal, people may not understand, well, are they really going to do it or might they do it? You know, and then also, you know, if you're writing in simple present tense, it sounds super confident. And so this is the second reason why I think that a lot of people use simple present tense and proposals, because it automatically sounds confident, like you know what you're talking about. This is what we are doing, you know, we're just going to do it, you know. So that's why I think present tense is used a lot, especially in proposals. So here's an example of ways to be concise, but you have to take into consideration the meaning of the word in order to reword it in a concise way. So what not to do, example here, during that period of time, you could reword that during that time, because time indicates you're already talking about a period of time, like an interval of time. So you don't need that. You know, membrane area, well, a membrane has an area. You don't need to say that. Pink in color, pink is a color. You don't need in color. Shiny is an adjective for an appearance, so you don't need to say shiny in appearance, just say shiny. And so sometimes you actually have to take a step back and say, read it, and then look at the meanings of each word and say, oh, wait a minute, I don't really need that. So often just striking out something and then see, well, oh, okay, I can drop a word there and it doesn't change the meaning of what I meant to say. Okay, so here's another example, the educational process. Well, education is a process. You don't need process. And athletic activities could just be athletics. And governmental system, you could just say government, because a government is a system. So that's another one where you have to look at the meanings of what you're saying. Here's a great one with preface statements. For all intents and purposes. You don't need that. You can just strike that out. Like, that's not conveying any meaning. And like, you know, and also, you know, where you get to the end where it says technological aspects, well, aspect doesn't really convey any meaning. So that's another type of edit you can make if you want to be concise. Okay, so the next 4 slides are just examples. I'm not going to go through every one of them, but it shows you kind of the usefulness and the utility of this book on the style towards grace and clarity, that you can take a phrase, and a lot of these are prepositional phrases and clause phrases, and then you can just reduce it to like one word. So you could say, you know, prior to could just be before. You don't need 2 words to say the same concept. You know, in anticipation of, well, that could just be before. So that's the concept here, is that sometimes these phrases that you're putting in your writing, they could just be boiled down to 1 word. And so he goes through it, and he has a lot of examples. Joseph Williams has a lot of examples in the book. So here, you're going to get these slides. We're going to make them available. So I don't need to go through every one of them, but, you know, just to give an example here, in the event that, just say if, you know, in reference to, you could just say about, on the occasion of, you could just say when. So you can, a lot of these phrases, when you see them, especially when they're prepositions, you can often reword them. Oh yeah, so here's another one, like this top one here, you know, has the opportunity, you could just say can, is it crucial that, you can just say should or must, things like that. Some others, oh, so now here's another key strategy for making things more concise. Often you want to word things in a positive way instead of a negative way, because when you word it in a negative, you're automatically using more words. So not many could be converted to few, and not the same could just be different. And also, there's some thought that it's easier to understand things when it's worded in a positive, because you stick more to just a simple subject, verb, object format when you do that. But this is a key way to go ahead and get rid of a few words. Okay, gerunds. Gerunds are a noun that looks like a verb, and they can be used to make writing more concise. And so an example, if I wrote this example, but there's a lot of them that you can do this. I use this technique all the time. And it's in order to identify key features in the data, we use criteria to sort the data. Now you could reword this as using sorting criteria, key features are found. But another key use, not only can you word things to be more concise, but the critical thing about using gerunds is that it gives you another type of sentence structure. And so it makes your writing have more variation. It's not a hard technique, this is an easy technique to do, but it gives you, instead of just using your typical like clause statements where, you know, where you have a main part of a sentence and then a clause, you know, yeah, we have been doing this since the beginning, well, you know, so you don't, now you have another way, you can switch it to using gerunds, and it keeps you from using these clause words like since and while and where and because too frequently. And I had a big problem with that. I was using too many of the same clause words repeatedly. And one of my biggest ones is while. I'll use while too much. But you want some variety, and you want to word it concisely. And so the gerunds are like a 2-for-1. And so definitely recommend reading up more on gerunds. So you can have organizational problems. It could be overall that you've got things out of order, but typically people don't have things way out of order because there's a typical organization to a journal article and an organization to a proposal that's written into the announcement requirements. And so typically, you know, people will have the main sections right, and it's in the results section where the organization can get a little, you know, often needs reworking. And here, one of my techniques for dealing with this issue is to use subheadings and you know, main headings and subheadings, and then I'll just go through and I'll just read the headings and the subheadings. And that often will tell me if I've got something out of order. And I'll do all the headings automatically using a given style. And then when I make a table of contents, it pulls like, you know, those styles to build the table of contents. And I'll just read the table of contents. I'm like, oh, wait a minute, something's out of order. And then I reorganize it. So that's a good way to do that. Paragraphs, you know, do your sentences flow well? Are they in a logical order? And the key thing at the paragraph level is that you want your main point to be either the beginning or the end of a paragraph. And that's because of the way people read. People emphasize what's at the beginning and the end of a paragraph more. So you really want your main points to be at the beginning or the end. and then also you want to look to see if you use too many of the same clause words and conjunctions when you're editing your paragraphs as well. And then sometimes I had this problem a lot, and now I go through and I switch the order of my clauses at the sentence level, because basically you can have a sentence, but you need to relate that one sentence to what's before and after it. So sometimes you actually need to swap the clauses. And I was making that mistake a lot, having them, one clause before the other, and I should swap it. But it's really the reason for swapping. It has to do with how you connect one sentence to another. So that's one reorganization thing that is at the sentence level, but it's impacted on it impacts the whole paragraph. If you have too many phrases and clauses in your sentences, you want to shorten them. And are your sentences too short or too long? That can make it choppy. And then coherence. What's your main point? What's the purpose of your plots and tables that you really want to highlight? And then again, here, people pay attention to more the beginning and end of paragraphs. Are you really supporting your arguments? Is everything in your paper necessary to support your arguments? If you've got something that's really not leading to your point, cut it. You're just going to obscure your point if you have something extra in. Cohesion, this is basically the flow and dealing with, are your sentences too choppy? Then you need to go ahead and combine some of them. Are all of your sentences in active voice? This can make it choppy. So a lot of people say, just only use active voice. That's actually not true. That can mess up your flow and make things choppy. So typically, you might want to have most of your sentences in active voice, but then you might want to connect a couple active sentences by sticking a passive sentence in the middle. And what that does is the organization of a passive statement will help you connect one active sentence to another active sentence after that. So a passive sentence does have a role, and it's with this flow and cohesion and transitioning from one sentence to the next sentence. And that's where you would want to actually use passive voice. But limit it. You don't want to overuse it. Transitions between paragraphs. A lot of times you'll have like a transitional statement at the beginning and ends of paragraphs to help connect the paragraphs. Now, in technical writing, you don't want to do this too much because you're space limited. And so you really need to have good section titles and subheading titles. And sometimes these will have to make the transition for you. Now, if you are going to use transitional statements to help connect one paragraph to the next, you want to make those short, because if they're too long, people are going to get bored and they're not going to really read them anyway. So keep any transitional phrases and statements connecting paragraphs down to the minimum. Precision. This is one that is hard and can cause a lot of problems in technical writing. You want to make sure that you're specific. You want to avoid vague words like very, large, small. How large is it? How small is it? Can you put a number on it? Can you make a table? You might want to say like X is 5 times what was seen in an earlier study. And so by actually going and trying to be precise or relating it to something else that's been seen, you're actually giving yourself, you're building your, you're going to build up your conclusions, build up material which you can use in your conclusions. In your results section, you don't want to waste a lot of space saying the obvious things, like saying what the X and Y labels are, describing your color schemes, saying a date for every little wiggle, and some of that you want to put in the caption. You don't want to put it in the body. You want to add relevance to your results in the results section. You don't want to go overboard on that because, but you want to basically set things up so that when you get to your discussion and your conclusion section, you can tie back in. Don't give a detailed description and words of everything that's on the plot. That will drive people crazy. You just want to point out what's new what's different, what's surprising. And then you're going to connect back to what's new, what's different and surprising in your discussion and your conclusions. You can make things more compelling by doing comparing and contrasting and relating what your work to what's seen in theories and stuff like that, or what was seen in another data set. And this will foreshadow what you're going to talk about in your discussion and conclusions. Are you having problems with repeating blocks of content? And so you have to literally go back and read what you've written to see if you're reusing a good chunk of material in one section that you're using it in another. So the problem might be that you're stopping and starting when you're writing. And so it's good to review, the things that you've just written before you start writing the next section of your work. And that's a good way to help get rid of blocks of text, bigger blocks of text that are repeated by accident. You may not have, properly organized your work, and so you need to look back to see if you're going to shuffle, if you need to shuffle things around. And some general advice is work on your memory through a hobby. I don't have the best memory, so this was an issue for me, but by chance, I was doing a bunch of dance classes and I had started doing choreographies, which takes a lot of memory. And it turned out to be very helpful, because then I started to remember, oh, wait a minute, I already said this once. I don't need to say it again, or I need to move it from that section to this section. And so I found it a lot easier to edit after I started doing these really complicated dance choreographies. And so it's a side benefit, and I take a Renaissance approach to life, and there is a benefit as evidenced by this kind of issue. Shorthand phrases. Often you have this complicated thing, but you need to repeat it throughout your document. And you need to find a shorthand way to say this complex thing. You can't keep redoing that long wording over and over. So an example might be like, typically we perform a multi-step process, removing 3 sources of background errors. From here on, we refer to this process as the standard method. And you can also use acronyms, but don't go overboard making up all your own new acronyms. You do want to stick to the standard acronyms where possible, but if there's something you just can't find a good shorthand for, you might create your own acronym, but don't create 20 acronyms. Maybe just create 1 or 2 key ones. And then, if you're if you want a shorthand way, but you're only going to use it in a couple paragraphs, then you can just make a reference to a previous notation. So a way of that would be, we use a 3-step process consisting of steps X, Y, and Z, and then the next sentence might be such a complex process. It is necessary because. And so the word such comes in very handy in this situation, and also words like this and that, but you're just referring to an adjacent sentence, something else inside the same paragraph. Now, you can't space those things out very distantly, or else this and that don't work anymore. Another option might be, we use a 3-step process consisting of steps X, Y, and Z. This 3-step process is necessary because. Or you can make it more general, this process is necessary because. Now, this took me a long time to figure out. This one was brutal. And but this comes in very handy, very handy. Oh, okay. And so that was like really the main things I wanted to go through. I will just like show, these are the main 3 that I recommend at the top, and then some additional ones. I've got some more by Joseph Williams, Craft of Scientific Writing, and then there's an older book, Essentials for Scientific and Technical Writing. This one Stephen Fuselier recommended, and he also recommended Zen of Proposal Writing. And then Craig DeForest had recommended some books on visual, graphics, visual displays of data. So there's these by Edward Tufts, and and then also another one is like analytical writing by David Rosenwasser and Jill Stevens. And then I'm just going to flip through and just show you what else is in here. These are the book reviews, why I think these books are good. And I talk about specific chapters that are useful and why they're useful. So if you know you're having a problem with a certain thing, you can go straight to that chapter. And then the Oxford book has a lot more material than you'll typically need, but these 3 chapters are the most relevant to a lot of the problems that you have in technical writing. So like this book, you definitely probably don't need to read in total, but I definitely recommend reading the first 2 books kind of more in total, or especially the first one, read that one all the way through. It's easy to read. And then I have like some notes on the Norman Conquest, and the style books, the Joseph William books go through about the Norman Conquest too, and also like legal language. A lot of people have the same problem in legal, that, you know, lawyers tend to have the same problem. Their writing tends to they've noticed their writing gets worse once they start reading more of the legal documents that are written in this older style that's going back to the Norman Conquest. And so it's not, you know, English is just a complicated language, even for native speakers. And it's because it's a blend of so many different languages. That's why it makes it hard. And the French use a lot of prepositional phrases. And so that's coming from the Norman Conquest as well. And all the tion, sion, all the nominalizations, that is mostly coming from Norman French. And French was seen as, at one point was seen as the language of the elite and the royalty and the scholarly. And so that's how English, part of how English became more complicated. So it's one of the ways. There's other ways it became more complicated, but that is one key way. And so I think that's all I have.
Heather, thank you so much. I am one that has 3 languages, all badly a soup in my brain, so I appreciate. And my
yeah, you know,
I grew up in Brazil, so Portuguese is like French. It's a long. You don't write direct. You write, if you write direct, it's too simple. You have to write in a very convoluted way. So learning to write direct. I will open to questions. We have 10 minutes. So if you have any questions for Heather, if you can write in your chat, and then I can pick some of the questions. And I know that Joyce had a survey for you folks to fill out. She's going to put it in the chat. We are looking, let me just quickly, while you think about questions, let me just share really quick, since we are running out of time. This is the next webinar. So we are going to alternate between professional development and issues that came out in our testimonials. And I love that Heather gave examples that she learned how to write better by taking dance classes. I love that analogy. You usually don't hear scientists speak like that. But anyway, we're going to have Margie Fivelson and Nikki Fox talking about their experience. And later on, we will have other webinars talking about how it's to be an immigrant and coming to US and other issues. So if you think about issues, let me just show really quick for the folks.
Wait. Rob, there's a couple questions in the chat. So
I know, I'm going to swap to that, Joyce, in a second. I just wanted to show folks wanting to be involved in the outreach. We have in Shield Outreach Gmail, and so send us.
So there's one.
So let's look at the questions.
Okay.
Oh, I see that Sarah Seeger said, how can people identify the weaknesses? Sarah, you want to ask?
Yeah, I think that one, you can have people read your work, and you can ask them to give you statements, like not to correct it for you, but tell you like roughly where the issues are.
Hi, no, actually, hi, this is Sarah. Thanks for a great talk.
Hi, Sarah.
Actually, it's for my students because, you know, I have so many students. I have like 20 people in my group. I'm wondering if there's a way for people to have like a self-assessment so that they can try to improve on their own without me having to, you know, read it and tell them.
Yeah, well, definitely a lot of mistakes that people made with me was they would just mark it how they would rewrite it. And it wasn't helpful to me because I wasn't identifying the trend. So I actually seen the books that I recommend show you like kind of all these bad categories but then it gives you a solution. So what I found was when I read The Style Towards Clarity and Grace, which covered most of my major problems, that I went back and read it a second time. And then I was much faster at seeing and identifying where I had problems and knowing, oh yeah, I just need to do this. Like I already knew what to do too. So I feel like going through these books that show you bad example and good example trains your eye to see what your problems are, but also like don't mark it like how you would fix it, but tell them like, dude, these sentences are choppy. Like give them like adjectives to describe like kind of where they're going wrong. Like, you know, you've got things out of order, you need to go and reorganize. Like give them like an overall statement like that. It forces them to go through and think about what they did.
Sarah, have you tried to have the group's member read each other documents and correct before they send it to you? This is another technique I use in my group.
To see what they've done wrong. And so if you give them the description of something they can look for, then they start to see.
Right.
And I think
I don't want to take too much of the Q&A, but they each have their own writing guide where they're supposed to enter improvements that they need personally out of the general, you know, things that come by. But okay, thanks a lot. We're definitely going to get the books.
Yeah.
Okay, we have other fabulous questions here from, yes, we will make the slides available as well as a recording. And Chris Lauder,
You can find it on the website. So the webinar will be on the website. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, I'll go through and fix a couple typos. So we'll do an updated version. But yeah.
There is some question about how to catch yourself from falling into the passive voice.
Yeah.
And instead of the present tense, and how you difference. There is Leslie Young also is asking the balance with the technical difference between shell
So
and
Let her answer the passive voice question.
Yeah, I have a thing for the passive voice. Typically, you're using too many normalizations. You see the word you see ION too much at the end of words. You've probably written it in passive voice. You can scan, your eye can scan to see how many TION, SION words you have. And that will give you a trigger. Oh, wait a minute. I need to do subject verb, which gets you into the active voice. So it's easy to spot.
we have a question about communication techniques. I'm going just down the questions from Thomas Lechner about have you encountered any communication techniques that generate unnecessary stigma in the scientific community?
Well, just in general, if you don't write well, you're just not going to win a proposal. It doesn't matter how good your ideas are. You don't write it well, so it's easy to understand, it's clear. And even if you don't write it concisely, the odds of you winning go way down. So that's a big issue. Now, issues with speaking, that's a whole nother talk. I've been jotting down some notes. Like I want to do one on giving good presentations, but that's probably more in depth than you want to go here. But
We probably
really
will have a future webinar on that.
There's another question on shall versus will. How do you balance the technical difference? This one you had skipped, Marav.
Oh, yes. Good catch.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you know what? I don't use future tense. Like, literally, I have to work at it. On a proposal, I just use simple present tense. Like, I don't put, obviously, will is better than shall if you're doing a proposal. But honestly, just get rid of it. Just use simple present tense because you say, like, I do, it sounds way more confident it sounds like you already have the basic work done. So if you write it in simple present tense, like you're ready to go. It's already happening. Like, and so it's a psychological effect. Simple present tense sounds way more confident. And if you look at these mission proposals, I can't think of a mission proposal that's not written in simple present tense. Like the ones that I've been a part of, all simple present tense. It just sounds way more confident. I write the small proposals the same way now. So that was a big lesson too. Like you really see how important it is to be concise and have clear figures. That's a kind of a third presentation I want to give, is how to make your figures convey like one main point and streamline them and get them smaller, get rid of extra white space and stuff. That's the kind of the third one I want to do. But
folks, there is, and we will have you, Heather, back absolutely to give good presentations and definitely for webinar. We have a question about what are some good journals as standard for technical writing, especially for learning.
So, you know, I don't have an English degree, so I can't really recommend like from a English trade journal. Like I can't, you know, that's not my trade, so I can't really do that. However, now if you want, what you need to do, if you want to kind of like a style that maybe where you can kind of see where people have used a lot of these techniques, just find an author that's easy to read and read a bunch of their papers. You need to read their papers anyways, probably for your field, but find somebody in your field that's really good at writing. And I think that's how I found the shorthand way, like how to word things shorthand way. I think I might have got that from Jack Gosling, like reading some of his papers. But basically find somebody in your field who practices good techniques, that's clear, concise, easy to understand.
Simple.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Somebody had recommended that I read a lot of Jack's papers, and I did. I have a funny story about Jack. So at the time, Dave McComas was my boss, and he said, "Oh, you know, you need to make sure you read like Jack's papers and write like Jack." And then and in the meantime, I found these books, and I was working on trying to improve my writing, and I was co-author on a paper with Jack. I had Jack as a co-author on my paper. I think that's what it was. And so I sent it to Jack, and Jack hardly marked a thing on my paper. And so I Xeroxed it, I put it in Dave's mailbox. Dave like comes to my office, and he's like mad, and he's like, Jack's just getting easy. Because like Dave like didn't like my previous paper. He didn't like the way it was written. So he's like, no, like she can't be getting better. But no, I was getting better because even Jack was like fine.
It was like, I have a question, and we are coming to the end of the webinar. So last question, folks, from Sam Evans. I found the language about psychological issues very helpful. Do you have any advice for how to find the proper balance between worried, anxious writing and relaxed writing?
Yeah, so I have kind of two things, like on that one. Basically, think about how you would tell somebody. And I haven't tried it out, but you might try the diction. You know, a lot of the programs, like, you know, word processing programs have the option to do dictate. So you might try that. But basically, if you try to think about how you would word it when you speak, you're probably going to do subject, verb, object. It's going to automatically make it more concise. And then the second part of that is once you get good at identifying what you're doing wrong and you have a solution for it, then a lot of the worry falls away. Like once you become confident that you can fix it, and I still don't do the best job, I'm not perfect, but I don't worry, I don't get anxious anymore. And getting anxious and worrying was making my writing worse, making me do more of the things that people hated. So I think developing a confidence that you can apply, you can use these examples of what in the books are the bad example, you can start to see when you're doing the bad thing. But then you have the solution because the book tells you, well, if you're doing this bad thing, this is what you do to fix it. So, and this is where the analytic skills actually can come in handy, which you probably already have a lot of analytic skills if you've gone into a technical field. If you can get it to where you're using your analytic skills, which you're more comfortable with, you're probably not going to get as anxious. But getting anxious definitely made my problem a lot worse.
Thank you so much. Guys, this is 3:01. I don't want to keep people beyond the 1 hour. Heather was fabulous, beyond my expectations, and I am sure of rest. And we're looking to have you come back and teach us other skills. And looking to see all of you guys in the next webinar. It's a month from now with Margaret Kivelson and Nikki Fox. Okay, bye folks. Have a great weekend.
All right, bye.